As businesses around the world buckle in and brace themselves for the impact that the coronavirus pandemic will have on their operations, proper crisis management has become a necessity for company leadership. Yet only 54% of companies have a crisis plan in place. One of the most important actions that business leaders can take in the event of a global crisis event like COVID-19 is to quickly implement a plan to communicate company-wide updates. That's why Beekeeper prepared a general list of internal communication tips to help you effectively communicate with your team during a crisis situation. Download Beekeeper's free crisis communications checklist today at www.beekeeper.io/crisisavertedpodcast. That's www.beekeeper.io/crisisavertedpodcast. Welcome to the Crisis Averted Podcast, produced by CJ Media Solutions. I'm your host, CJ Arlotta. In this episode, I speak with Janine Williams, founder and CEO of Impulsify, a retail technology company that provides tools, data-driven insights, and retail services designed to help hoteliers and non-retailers create easily managed and highly profitable lobby retail outlets. During our conversation, she provides insight into how Impulsify shifted gears during the COVID-19 pandemic and shares what her company has coming down the pike. You can contact Janine at janine@impulsifyinc.com. Feel free to send me your feedback at cj@cjmediasolutionsllc.com. Oh, and if you're listening to the Crisis Averted podcast on Apple Podcasts, do me a favor. Please leave a rating, review, or both. I'd greatly appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Janine, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited. We've been talking about this for a while now.
Me too. So for listeners who aren't familiar with you, mind telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you're up to now?
Yes, my name is Janine Williams. I am the CEO of Impulsify, which is technically a software company, but we really dominate kind of all aspects of grab and go retail, particularly in hotels. So I am what I defined as a reluctant CEO, first time CEO who just had a cool idea and figured out how to get it built, and now have been scaling for quite some time. So we're about 7 years old, and I am just learning how to avert crisis on a daily basis.
So now what's the story behind Impulsify? Why did you start the company, and what was the problem you were looking to solve?
Yeah, that's exactly where it stemmed from. Was I was in the distribution side for this channel, supplying predominantly Marriott hotels with the candy and snacks and beverages that you find in that little lobby retail store. And had been working with them at my previous company for several years and just continuously asked them for data. I'm obsessed with the data side of things, and there was none. And I couldn't believe it that, a large brands, global brands had no idea what was being purchased, what it was purchased for, how much it sold for. And I wanted to be able to track that data. So when I left my previous company and started Impulsify, it was really to create a piece of technology in a space that should have long since had one and didn't. And that's where it stemmed from, was just being able to guide the brands and really measure what hotel guests need and want when they're traveling, based on data rather than just kind of front desk perception of this is what sells.
What services does Impulsify provide specifically? You mentioned software before, but do you also provide the hardware? Does Impulsify assist with the design aspect of marketplaces at all?
We do. Initially, we didn't. We just kind of provided a cloud-based point of sale system at their front desk that allowed them to scan. But about 3 years in, we had gathered millions of transactions at the UPC level of what was selling. And so we spun up a services side to the company that would take all of that data and say, okay, if you need to dedicate X amount of space to beverage, here are the best-selling beverages within every major category that you should be offering to really maximize the space. Because as you know, most of those are very small format retail outlets. So putting a product up on the shelf that is proven to sell and turn and earn its place was just knowledge and data that no one had previously. So we design programs both at the property level, at the actual hotel, and then well above property, and did some major design projects for IHG, for Hilton. We give them our data and build programs around data to help them really have great retail.
So are your customers hotel owners, management companies, hotel brands, or is it a good customer base mix?
It is definitely a mix. We started out, our first client out of the gate was Hilton, kind of such a blessing dropped in our lap. They'd been looking for a solution for a long time and found out that we were building one, and were our first pilot. They piloted, I think, 6 hotels to begin with. So it started at the above property level, but then once we were certified to be able to sell to hotels, it was kind of just a license to sell. And so we began developing relationships at both the property level and the franchise level. And we continue to work with all 3 levels to keep building, keep growing.
What were some of the challenges you faced with that initial pilot program with Hilton?
How much time?
We got some time.
um, Definitely beyond a shadow of a doubt. The largest is just interfacing with their property management systems. For Hilton, for example, they use OnQ, which was somewhat proprietary. And we had to build to that interface and get certified through their security processes and IT processes, to make sure that anyone who is interfacing and has access to any type of guest data is highly secure. So that is time consuming and but so worth it, because if you have a point of sale in a hotel that can't charge to a room, it's not a great guest experience. So by and large, that's the largest challenge we encounter anytime we want to work with a client is what PMS are they on? Are we certified with that PMS, and how much development time and resources will it take to deliver it if we're not?
How fast can you set up a program for a property?
If we're interfaced with them, it's usually 30 days. So we would contract them. They have a 30-day onboarding period where we interface with the PMS and get all of those kind of configurations set up. And then simultaneously, they're training. For our front desk solution, they can do it definitely in as little as 30 days. It's quite quick. We've even had hotels launch themselves. It's very a user-friendly application. When we're doing our self-service kiosk, which is kind of all the rage right now through COVID, that has a hardware component involved, that has a credit card terminal involved, where we have to set up merchant services and banks and things like that to deposit. And those usually take about 45 to 60 days.
You mentioned in an interview that 2019 was a period of hyper growth for your brand. What contributed to that growth?
So many hotel brands simultaneously taking a really strategic approach to retail for what I would say is really kind of the first time. Brands like Hilton Garden Inn, Crown Plaza, Avid, by IHG, they really said this should not be a pantry, which is happy joy to my ears because I hate it being referred to as a pantry.
Right.
This should be out front. This should be strategically sourced. This should be based on consumer preferences, and it should be managed and operated with the same quality as any other aspect of our hotel. And so with us really being the only certified solution out there for some of those brands, we had just a ton brought to us. We did nearly 300 deployments within Hilton Garden Inn. Almost every Crown Plaza that goes through a PIP or property improvement plan adds the marketplace that we designed for IHG, and that includes self-service kiosk. So it was just a sudden culmination of all of our efforts over several years coming together, and people saying, wow, this one can really generate revenue. Two, it definitely improves guest experience, and we want that guest experience to be the same in all aspects of our lobby as, whereas the lobby store was often left out of that planning.
So you play in the hospitality space, and we all know that that particular industry was hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. How did the COVID-19 pandemic impact your business?
Well, we at the time were probably 95% dependent on hospitality. We thought it would take us down, quite honestly, because we are definitely kind of a non-essential in a world of essential or non-essential, and people being defined that way. We were a non-essential tool, or so we thought. And so March, April, May, we took just as a company, we took a very soft approach to our hotels. We posted a ton that we were there for them, that we would modify subscriptions for them, that we would help in any way that we could to not be a burden to them. And that was well received. We issued a lot of credits, a lot of kind of moved deferred revenue, and that was certainly impactful to our company. But then what we realized in May, June, July was the grab and go store was really the only F&B left on property, because they couldn't do breakfast and they couldn't do bars and bistros and restaurants the way they were accustomed to. And so we saw grab and go sales actually go up, because they could either leave the property and go buy something outside. They could have it delivered through a Grubhub, or the hotel could really step up their grab and go space and offer kind of higher quality meals, better snacks and items to keep the revenue on property. And so we actually saw a spike again. And we are now really trending to do what we did last year, which was a high growth year. It's looking like we're going to kind of net out even with all the credits and deferments that we gave.
So you mentioned that the majority of your customers are in the hospitality space, but did you slowly move out of that market? I believe you kind of moved into the quote unquote glamping space this summer. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Americans do not sit still even when there's travel bans. So,
Right.
I love that. But they went to camping. And so we had a number of camping sites reach out to us. And yes, several in that kind of glamping space where it's a little bit more luxurious. It's not just your standard campground. There's community amenities. And one of those community amenities is really well done general stores that give them basic grocery and s'mores kits and the things that you must have while camping. And we've been invited into that space, and it's just such an unexpected vertical that we hadn't really looked at previously. But with campgrounds full all summer long, and more opening to meet that need that's really been generated through COVID, we've now closed 2 large camping deals that we are launching imminently. So excited to share those once they're launched.
So when everything hit with COVID, and you saw the hospitality space, how it was just, revenue going quickly down the tube. What were some of the things that you decided to do in your spot as a leader for your company? How did you evaluate the situation, assess it, and try to move forward?
I think you just nailed it. There is a thought process of we have to survive this versus a thought process of we are going to thrive through this. And we took a thrive approach. I think survival is kind of bare minimum, and it kind of sets you up for failure on a lot of levels. We looked at every opportunity that we would have to, I hate the word pivot,
Right.
look at other verticals, look at other projects that we just have not spent time or resources on in the past. How could we continue to grow? How could we continue to thrive rather than just survive? And our team was tired. Our team was tired in January from this massive growth year. But I can't say enough about the people at Impulsify. We live and breathe this culture of above and beyond and 100% together, and Impulsify Red. That's a huge part of who we are. And we just dug our heels in and kept moving forward. That's exactly the only words I could use. Rather than stopping and hunkering down and hoping that we survived it, we forced ourselves to keep moving forward.
We mentioned briefly the glamping space, but what other verticals were you looking at? Maybe verticals that didn't work out?
Actually, we have another vertical that's just booming for us right now, and that is luxury residences. Um, Really kind of fascinating, but so many developers that work on apartment buildings also build hotels. Obviously, it's commercial real estate, so there's some overlap there. And we had someone that we had built a store for in a hotel reach out and say, I have these development projects within luxury residences, and they really want to add amenities, and if possible, profit center amenities, to make the complex more valuable to its residents. And so we began designing and putting in basically a grab and go, almost grocer. We do toilet paper, which was saved the day in 2020 for so many.
Right.
We do pet supplies and more grocery based items for them so that their residents can, especially during that horrible period of COVID when it was just so unknown and people were terrified to go to their local grocery store, and they could literally just ride the elevator down and get basics that they needed from the store. And so that has been extremely popular. And we're doing right now more new business in apartments than we are in hotels.
I assume that the software is set up it's pretty flexible if you can take different types of properties and different types of businesses, correct?
It is the only place where we are really kind of locked in is within hotels who need to be able to post to rooms. For our other verticals like campgrounds and apartments, they are so fascinated and really more interested in the self-service component of our kiosk, which is kind of a 15-inch hardware device that they can walk up, scan the item themselves, and pay for it with a credit card without having to interact with either the front desk if it's in a hotel or with a cashier if it's in a traditional retail store. And that has really made it very easy for us to launch quickly into other verticals because they don't have those PMS requirements and certification processes. They just need a transaction, a credit card transaction.
Are most of the locations self-service?
In apartments and campgrounds, they're exclusively self-service. In hotels, we're seeing a massive uptick. We had about a 68% increase in new orders that included a kiosk compared to last year. So, the discussions around interactions in lobbies and common areas, and they have plexiglass up now in most of them. And so handing food back and forth to be scanned or processed in a hotel is just making that kiosk essential. It's really an increasing demand for the self-service retail.
Do you plan on focusing on any other verticals in 2021? I know that's really difficult to think about next year. We're all trying to get through this year, but
we definitely have some that have been of interest to us throughout are gyms like your Core Power or Orange Theory. They very often have a small retail offering, and sometimes the member services person is at the counter, sometimes they're not. And so, you come out of your workout and you want to grab something to drink or a snack to go, and there's no way to actually pay for it because the member services person is busy. So we've been looking at gyms. Sadly, we had been making inroads into senior centers so that there would be kind of an on-site grab and go for visitors and grandkids when they came to visit grandparents. And that sadly is kind of on hold just due to all the safety precautions that they need to make.
what's in store for Impulsify for the remainder of 2020 and next year? Are you working on any type of new technology, services?
So much.
Yeah.
What's funny is I think back in March, April, everybody thought we had so much time. Oh, we're being sent home and we're not going to have to travel to the office and we'll have all this extra time. And we believed that wholeheartedly that we would have suddenly tons of time. And so we took on some pretty massive initiatives, both with our product and with our overall branding, our marketing. And then we didn't slow down. We didn't stop being busy.
Yeah.
And so we have all of our kind of normal workload But we have these kind of large projects that we're trying to deliver as well. So Impulse Point, which is our core product, is getting a pretty substantial user interface update. It was about 7 years old, and even though it looks really cool compared to a lot of hotel technology that's still fairly dated, it was dated, and we wanted to make, just from all of our learnings of how people use the tools that we provided them, what they use, what they don't use, what we thought would be important and wasn't. We've been doing a pretty substantial update to that user interface. Kiosk, we're spending quite a bit on just making it better. We will be launching touchless, you heard it here, very soon. And that'll be awesome, where they don't even have to touch the screen. They'll just use their phones to control the transactions, so that we can really, really minimize any type of cross-contamination concerns that they might have when making a purchase in a common area.
And when does that launch?
You're really putting me on the hook here. It is due to be released Q4. So we're hoping to head into the new year with it. We're trying to get our existing customers transferred over to it, and then start launching it for new customers as well.
What have been some of the challenges Impulsify has been having with developing that touchless technology?
Really, it's just resources. We did, in order to minimize expenses and just the unknowns, we did limit our resources as well. We lost some really key team members to reduce costs during this as much as we could. And it's resource driven. Just there's only so much that we can do, kind of like every hotel is experiencing right now. We're trying to provide the same level of service with less people. And that means some initiatives just have to take a little bit longer than we would like.
What were some of the lessons you learned from the COVID-19 pandemic as a leader that you're going to take with you and implement for years to come?
I would say the number one lesson that I learned, I'll get all teary on you, is that we are resilient. We are a resilient nation, and I don't know any better way to phrase it than that. But, in a time when you would think that so many companies would just roll up, give up, teams were being kind of torn apart and sent home and asked to do things differently, America just bounces. And that's really what our team has been super focused on. Is this is not normal. We don't want to think this is ever going to be the new normal. So how do we quickly change, adapt, grow through this, and do it as a team, really come together as a team? That has been huge for us. And just not believing for 1 second that travel in America is going to go away. We're just traveling differently than we did before. We're going to campgrounds now. Okay, then let's go do that. That has been for me really the biggest single learning moment, is that this is a tragedy. It's a tragedy health-wise. It's a tragedy to the economy, but America keeps moving forward, and Impulsify follows suit. We just change what we do and how we do it and keep moving.
Janine, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.